Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap, brought to you by CrowCast, of course. Where's Macca gone? Where are you, Macca? You've disappeared. What have you done to yourself? Hang on a sec. Let me just find you. I don't know where you are, mate. Start talking. No, you're not even talking. What's going on? There you go. How's things, mate?
All
right?
Yeah, well, I never went anywhere, mate. I've just been sitting here. Sort of okay, but I must admit I was pretty angry after the game, and look, I expected us to lose before the game, but I thought we were pretty brave. I actually thought we fought very hard. We couldn't contain Neil and Dunkley, but apart from that, you know, 26 frees to 15, and some of the frees they got. Yeah, I think it was the difference between the game, actually. Quite frankly, some of the stuff farcical, absolutely farcical. Some of those were farcical. They must have hated Billy Dowley. He had 5 frees alone against him, and I reckon about 2 of them were valid. I'm just really, really angry.
Really angry. Oh, this is unexpected.
I was pissed off, really pissed off. And, you know, for them to come on and say that the standard of umpiring this year has been first class or good, it's rubbish. If you went through that situation and went through that whole match, you would find about somewhere between 50 and 100 decisions missed or given wrong. It was just Rafferty's rules, the umpires, and we were just on the bad end of it.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree. I think there was some... the interpretation of holding the ball seems to have gone backwards a step, and seems to be up for discussion once again, but I didn't think it cost us the game.
Well, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it certainly was costly, Thane. It was costly. I mean, they got a couple of goals from situations where I thought they'd miss a free to us and then pay a free to them, and you know those situations become costly.
Yeah, there was a couple. I remember one front on contact that wasn't paid, that had to have been paid. It was ridiculous. I think it might have been on Murray or something. I can't remember. But it wasn't great. But, yeah, look, I think we let ourselves down with selection once again and executing under pressure, particularly in the first half. We seemed panicked and... didn't cope with their pressure and took a little bit too long to get Neil under control. But credit to the coaching staff, Mac. They did right the ship in the second half with regards to the way we dealt with it, but we couldn't transition the ball cleanly, unfortunately.
No, but I think they were just a little bit late with the Neil thing as well. Neil was just
they were
right.
Yeah, so they were. That's what I said. They were a bit late addressing that. They addressed it after half time, but really it needed to be something that was it was fairly obvious early on that he was off the chain, and they should have addressed it earlier.
And the interesting thing is Dunkley has got this marvellous way of accumulating kicks, and he's there as a negator type situation, but because he gets so many kicks, it becomes an attacking weapon, and everybody's talking about Neil, but Dunkley was accumulating at a massive rate as well. So, he's a star. He really is. Those two, they were the difference between winning and losing, and as I say, at least some assistance from the umpires, anyhow.
Okay, well, before we get into the nuts and bolts, Mac, let's say hello to everyone who's on Discord and on YouTube and on Twitter and on Facebook, and another healthy studio audience here. Don't forget, we are live and interactive, Macca, so if anyone wants to have their say, then please put up your hand in the Discord studio audience and we'll be happy to have you on, because God knows people get sick of listening to us, mate.
Don't blame them, mate.
No, why the hell do they keep tuning in? I have no idea. All right, look, let's crack straight into the weekend's results so that we can have a good long chat about the Crows game today. Yep. And it started with an interesting result on Friday night. No sooner had I written Essendon off, Mac, than they decided they'd give Collingwood a bit of a touch-up. 12 points in the end, 13-14, 92 to 12-8, 80 in a very entertaining game.
Yeah, I was in the same boat as you. The Pies came out, and they were a bit undermanned too. The Pies had 3 or 4 out with injury, but they really, the way they started, I thought this is going to be a one-horse race, and I think off memory, Chris got 3 goals in 3 minutes and all that sort of stuff, and then Collingwood were looking very good in that first quarter. But to Essendon's credit, they really got on top in the midfield. Merritt and what's his name? Caldwell. Caldwell was absolutely outstanding on it. Yeah. I just looked up the history of the boy. He was pick 11 in the draft that we took Jones, and he was taken by GWS, but eventually got traded to Essendon. So what a pickup they've got it through the trade. He was absolutely outstanding, and anyhow, Essendon they got on top, and in the end. They got to a very good lead, and then Collingwood as they do, made a bit of a burst, but no, they couldn't get there, and the Dons were too good on the day, and they deserved their win. Yeah,
Merritt was outstanding, I thought, and had some good backup. Their midfield really worked hard. Collingwood with injuries, so it's going to be difficult for them to get a meaningful spot in the 8, but they're not the type of team that you ever write off, Mac.
No, look, they always have a fair dinkum crack, and if you don't, they'll get you. But at the moment, as you say, they're a little bit undermanned.
Yeah. The next game, and Damien Hardwick summing it up for the Suns. They really need to stop dropping games like this, let alone games away. Losing this game, he must have been absolutely ready to punch someone, and his press conference summed it up. North in the end, 13-9-87, 4-point winners over Gold Coast, 12-11-83.
Yeah, well, look, if you win the clearances, you win the game. The Suns, they have got a very good midfield, but North Melbourne, they won the clearances 45-29, and there were some outstanding performances by young blokes like Sheasel and McCurchin. That's one of the... North Melbourne have picked up some very good players when they've been bottoming out, and I think their future is very, very bright. And LDU, he's actually, I reckon, one of the really best midfielders in the comp. He was in a really good team. He'd be an absolute star. And they were far too good. And on top of that, not far too good, but they were good enough to win the game in a very tight one. And you've got to hand it to the Ruckman Zeri. He's probably the most improved player in the competition.
Yeah, it looks like North are starting to play a good brand of football, and now it'll come down to talent for them as they make their rise off the bottom, and probably a little bit more assistance for Lucky up forward, and a bit like they've just got to look after their pillars a bit, and I think they'll be well on the way because they do have very good midfield, mate.
Yeah, excellent.
And then we had the Power just putting another little chink in Bevo's armour, 48-point winners. It brought a tear to my eye, as Port winning always does, because I'm so emotionally invested in Ken's livelihood. Port 15-12-102, the Bulldogs 8-6-54.
Well, I'm glad you are. It was a very comfortable win for Kenny, actually, Fane. And I thought Rosie played one of the outstanding games of the year. A magical game. 36 disposals, eight tackles, kick one, roll two. And, he played a star game for a captain. It was a great game. And overall, they backed up by Butters and Horn Francis. They've got a very, very good midfield. And, those three are really the driving force in Port Adelaide. And actually, without the big fellow out full forward who's out injured, and with Georgiades playing the role instead up there as the main man, they look much, much better. And I thought they played very, very well, actually. Pelly, I don't know what happened with him. He was flat.
Yeah, well, he can't be up every week. Look, I'm happy for Mitch Georgiades. He's had a rough time, and there's been speculation and all the rest of it. And I think he's really starting to grow in stature. Took a couple of really nice grabs, and when their midfield's firing Port and they're taking grabs up forward, they've still got lots of holes. But Western Bulldogs weren't able to get enough of the ball to put any pressure on them.
Yeah, well, Port's trick is to try and keep it in their forward line as often as they can and just get that wall across centre. And just on the law of averages, that one of their midfielders will get either score or get it to somebody to score. So, they were too good.
All right, then we had Geelong giving the resurgent Hawks a bit of a reality check down at the Cattery, 16-14, 110 to Hawthorn 9-5, 59, 51 points there. And Geelong keep getting it done, mate, and we keep writing them off, and they're sitting in the top four or thereabouts, and it's like, bloody hell, why don't you just die already?
I think you summed it up for me. That was a very good summary, Clean. I couldn't add much to that at all, really. I think that'll do.
The bastards just won't die. Like, just die already.
No. Incredible.
Anyway, and then probably the match of the round for mine was really entertaining game, this one. The Giants, after a very slow start, ran over Carlton down at Manuka, whatever you want to call it, 18-8, 116 to Carlton 16-8, 104, 12 points in the end. And the Giants showing that when their midfield gets switched on and Big Jesse's taker marks up forward, they're as difficult as any other team to beat.
Yeah, the way it started off, I thought it was going to be a thrashing. The Blues looked far too good. I think they got 5 or 6 goal up very early in the piece. 6 goal it was, and I thought, this is going to be an absolute hiding. But they tagged Walsh, and he was virtually almost a non-contributor. And Green started to dominate in the middle for GWS, and the other players all joined in as well. And after that, the Blues, I think it was, I can't remember how many goals in a row, but it was about 11 or 12 or something like that in a row. And then eventually the Blues did come back, but far too late. So, good win by GWS.
Certainly was, mate, and keeps them in touch, which I guess is what they need at this stage. Freo doing what they had to do against Richmond, 51-point winners, 16-9, 105 to 7-12, 54. Richmond lining up that number 1 pick very nicely at the moment.
Yeah, nothing to add there, Fane.
Oh, well, geez. Okay. Thanks. It's your 15 minutes, mate.
I know. Summaries are very good.
Similarly with Melbourne getting it done, 17-10, 112 to the beleaguered West Coast Eagles, 8-10, 58. Drums are starting to beat a little bit for Simo. I think the West Coast supporters are starting to look for a little bit more effort out of that team, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle their list over the off-season.
Yeah. Look, there's the thing that stood out for me in that particular game, apart from the fact that the Demons were far too good, is that the outstanding mark by Pickett, which would be one of the contenders for the mark of the year. I don't know whether you saw that one, Fane. It was outstanding. Got right up on the big boy's shoulders and took one. And they've got a couple of really good young guns. Windsor, who I really was hoping that we would get in the draft. He's developing into a very, very good player. And Van Rooyen, who they've given him time, and he's starting to. He kicked 4 goals, and he looked very good all around the ground as well. So, but Oliver, he's just spent 4. So I don't know how long they're going to persevere with him.
Well, he's a very interesting one because he's certainly a shadow of his best, and clearly, struggling with injury and form and whatever else is going off field that we don't know about. That's all gone pretty quiet, but Might be a bullet dodged in terms of our efforts to get him over the off-season.
A major bullet dodged. Yep.
Although, good players are always good players, Mac.
Yep.
And then we had probably the biggest upset of the round, St Kilda getting up by a couple of points. I've said two, should be three there. 13-6-84 to Sydney 11-16-81, and putting a bit of pressure on us to maintain our lofty position in 14th at the moment, St Kilda, with the big game against them next week.
Well, they've passed us. They've gone over us now, and I think we're in the bottom four now. I think we're 15th. Anyhow, moving on. In that particular game, the irony of it was a good game, very good game, and it's an interesting thing, and the coach might take a little bit of notice that when they play attacking football, they actually score. So, second loss in a row for the Swannies, and you wouldn't believe it. The same bloke, Logan McDonald, he was kicking for the game again in the last minute of the game thing, and again he kicked to the right and failed. So he failed two games in a row. He's got a kicking problem. He actually leans back it too early, and that's why he spoons it to the right.
Yeah. Having said that, he hasn't really lost because they've just signed him on for a couple of years, which is great for him, and it just shows that despite all the pressure that comes from going home, if you're a good club with good culture and at the pointy end of the competition, then you can hang on to those blokes.
Well, that's true. That is true. If you do the right thing by them and make them feel like that they're a very important part of the team, they'll stay.
Yeah, and Heaney, of course, looks like he's going to get suspended, and that will cost him any chance of the Brownlow. There's a couple of fancies for the Brownlow. I don't think he was a laydown by any stretch. With Dacos and Bontempelli probably edging him at this stage, but he's out of the race if he gets done.
Yeah, and I think he will probably get done. I'd be very interested in whether now is the moment, but the Rankin incident at some time.
Now's not the moment.
I just like to hear your version of it when it's time.
Yeah. I'll have a crack. Looking at the ladder first, though, and the Swannies still comfortably on top. What's that? 2 games clear still with a healthy percentage, so they can afford to have a bit of a reset. Carlton in second, clear on 44 points. Fremantle and Essendon on 42, rounding out the top 4. Geelong and Port on 40 points, and then Brisbane sneaking into the 8 after their win against us today, along with the Giants. So very handy wins to both of those clubs. And then outside the 8, Collingwood, still with a decent percentage, but under a bit of pressure now. Melbourne also on 36 points, and then the Bulldogs, Gold Coast and Hawthorn on 32 points. St Kilda on 24, leapfrogging us, as you said, Macca. We're on 22, West Coast on 12, North off the bottom on 8, and Richmond shoring that position up in 18th spot. So pretty interesting sort of a situation. There's still a bit of a log jam that you could throw a blanket over half a dozen teams at the moment. I'm a bit of a closet Suns sympathiser, and they had the opportunity to be in the 8 at the end of this round, and they just muffed their lines again.
Well, they just don't win away from home. It's just that simple.
No, it is that simple. They'll get absolutely flogged by Hardwick on the track this week. Absolutely flogged.
Do you think that type of thing is mental pain in the sense that they play like stars at home and losers away?
Look, I think you can have aberrations, and there's certainly a home ground advantage, but they've been in the competition long enough. Those players have played at Marvel often enough, and it's bloody North Melbourne who have got 7 supporters. It's not as if you're playing against 60,000 Collingwood fans, and the fast deck should actually suit them. So I think 1 or 2 games, it's an aberration, 3 or 4, it's a trend, and when you're looking at their record this year, it's absolutely a trend in my opinion.
Dead set trend.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to this afternoon's match, and it was the Lions getting up by 11 points in the end, 14-13, 97 to 13-8, 86. Mac, my impression was that we were always in it, but we never looked like winning.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I felt the same way, that if onlys all the time, we'd start to make an attack, and something would just go wrong. We'd kick it to the wrong person, or we'd hang on the ball too long, or something, whatever. It's if we'd done things right, and we could have possibly done it, but we just didn't, or we gave it to the wrong person, the wrong player. I'm the same as you, that the opportunities were always seemingly there, but we just were never. I always thought we were always just going to fall short, and we did.
I felt like we didn't handle the pressure at key moments, Mako. There was disposal errors, there was fumbling, there was poor decision making, a little bit of poor defence, all at key moments. I felt like the players seemed to execute the game that Nix wanted to bring, particularly in the second half when we shut it down a bit and closed it down around stoppage. But that first couple of minutes around stoppage, I think, was a good illustration of the game, where we held them up, but eventually we just weren't good enough to stop them from scoring, and they got that opening goal in the third quarter after a couple of minutes of arm wrestling, and it just seemed as we didn't have the poise and the skill set around stoppage to keep them in check.
Yeah, our disposal, I think, was the key thing that let us down in terms of not handling the pressure or causing a turnover. Sometimes it was choosing the wrong option. Sometimes it was just sheer poor disposal. And I think that's probably apart from, they had 2 outstanding players, but I still think in spite of that, if we had have been better in terms of our disposal, if we'd been more selective who we gave the ball to. 2 goals is not a lot in this game. You only have to do a couple of things more correctly and you can get those goals, or you can do a couple of things poorly and you cost those 2 goals. And unfortunately, we just kept doing that.
Well, you can argue that we probably lost it in the first quarter or the first half, and there was some big contributors to that, and 2 of them were leadership group, senior players in the team for experience, Brodie Smith and Lockie Murphy. Lockie Murphy hardly got near it, and Brodie Smith, whenever he did, you didn't want him to, because you knew what was going to happen. Just a dump kick. And there was some shocking disposal by Brodie Smith. I remember a couple of dump kicks into the forward line that were just nothing, a dump kick in defence when he should have been handballing boundary side. This is a bloke who's experienced. There were 2 goals that Brisbane got because of dump kicks in defence. One was a dump kick from, I think, Luke Nankervis, who's played AFL footy for 5 minutes. And the other one is from our future, Brodie Smith, who's played 950 games. So you can excuse Luke Nankervis. You can't excuse Brodie Smith, particularly because he had the opportunity to give it off, and instead he tried to break a tackle and ended up being forced to dump kick to centre half forward.
Yeah, I know these that you're talking about.
Yeah, could have been, mate.
But
no. It wasn't. I'm not talking about the Murray one. I'm talking about the Nankervis one earlier in the match. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same camp as you, because the coach talking about that he's an important part of our future at age 33. Absolutely bloody ridiculous. He shouldn't even be in the bloody side. He'd be knocking the door down in the 2s. Well, so he bloody ought to. He's playing against blokes that of a much, much lower standard. So to say that about Smith, that he's knocking the door down in the 2s, that's just absolutely rubbish. To say that he's an important part of our future at 33 years of age, that's just garbage as well. He's not an important part of bloody anything. And as you say, I can admit that the very, very first chance there was for a point, he went to get the kick out, and we knew it was going to the right-hand side, a dump kick. A dump kick
I
to
don't.
nobody. In fact,
I don't remember
sorry.
seeing Smith kick more than about 3 kicks to position. You know, most of what he dished up was just hurried and around the corner and blasting. It had no method to it whatsoever.
That's fair. That's fair comment.
Yeah. I also and Paige mentions it in the chat. I'm also, Paige, sick of particularly Rory Laird giving people shit on the ground. I saw in particular one instance where Laird gave Saligo a little bit of a burst because Saligo missed a handball to Laird. The problem was that Saligo handballed it to exactly where Laird would have been had he been in motion, but instead Laird was stationary. And that's the problem. It was on the outer side, half-back flank, I think. And Saligo put it exactly where Laird would have been if Laird was actually running past. But as usual, Laird was stationary. And there was another instance with Laird where he got the ball on a bit of a break on the outer side, and he got himself into trouble because at no stage did he actually think about running forward. His first instinct was to go backwards into play. And it sums Rory Laird's play up perfectly. That under any sort of pressure, he goes backwards. He hasn't got the pace, he hasn't got the core strength, he hasn't got the agility to break a tackle or give himself any separation. And if he'd have moved the ball forward, we would have been out. But instead, he turned and went back into play, and as a consequence, got himself in under pressure.
Yep, I can't argue with anything you've said there. He gets a lot of the ball, but you got to weigh up what he's done with the ball, what he could have done with the ball, and I noticed they had him in the best players in the summary online, but he wouldn't have been on mine.
You just can't have him in the best players. And if we look at the ins and outs, obviously it was Brodie in for Will Hamill. Zach Taylor was again the sub. The big one there in that little thing is that it was both Sam Berry and Josh Rochelli's 50th games, and it just shows how much we've bent Sam over and given it to him, because for them both to reach the same milestone in the same game is borderline criminal for Berry, and he's shown since coming back in that he's more than serviceable as that coalface midfielder, Macca.
Yeah, I thought he played very well last week. I thought he played reasonably well this week. Kicking not quite up to scratch at times. That's my one knock. But in terms of effort and he's a straight line runner as well, which is good.
At least he moves the ball forward.
Yep.
And I will let's talk quickly about Josh Rochelli, because I've been a bit, not an apologist for Josh, but he's not being played in the appropriate positions. And I noticed a couple of times when he was in and around stoppage that he was instrumental in clearing the ball. And I'd still maintain he's fantastic around stoppage and should be getting more CBAs. But if he doesn't toughen up soon, Macca, we got a big problem, because there were 2 or 3 instances where he was plain and simple just soft.
Oh, he did have that situation where he openly admitted that he was soft. He wasn't brave enough, and unfortunately, there's been since then a couple of incidents where once again he probably shouldn't have been. Well, he hasn't been probably as brave as he could have been. I'm with you. I think he should be given a lot more time in the in the midfield, and made him try and get him to do some hard work in the midfield, and tell him he's got to work his ass off in the midfield. He's got to take the blows if they come along, because he did start quite well actually. I thought he's in for a good game, but then he sort of died out as the game went on. Yeah,
it's not his is not his ability to take contact with ball in hand. It's his ability to stay strong in contests where things are beyond his control. And young Jake Saligo showed him how to do it when he backed back into a pack and took a nice grab there, with, ironically, Josh Rochelle coming the other way. But he a classic was the mark that Neil took at centre half forward from a dump kick, where Rochelle was coming in over the top for the spoil, and Rochelle didn't commit to that spoil physically, did not commit to it, because had he committed to it, Lachie Neal's a garden gnome. Like, he should have absolutely had Neal's measure on that, and he just didn't commit to the spoil.
Yep, can't argue with you again, Payne. You're spot on. It was a pretty weak effort. So,
I think the club's ability to be honest with players and honest with themselves is at times lacking. I'm being kind. It'll be interesting to see how they handle Josh. I just want him around the ball more, but he's not doing himself any favours at the moment because he's not playing at 110%. And his demeanour on the ground, Macca, and there was a particular instance that I noticed again late in the game when Darcy took that mark in the forward pocket and Rochelle was also in the frame, and Rochelle just wandered through the mark and past the two Brisbane Lion players that were covering Fogg doing that around the corner kick, and Fogg kicked the goal anyway, but Rochelle was completely oblivious and disinterested in what was going on. First of all, he should have known that Fogg wanted to kick it quickly, so why are you walking in front of the man on the mark? And secondly, he should have known that he was going to go around the corner, so why are you just walking past the two Brisbane guys there to cover it without actually putting pressure on them, as good players do? It was a completely self-centred response to Fogarty taking the mark instead of Rochelle.
Yeah, that is quite pathetic because he's actually disadvantaging his side. You don't do it. You just don't do it.
So I don't know what's going through Josh's head at the moment. He's got loads of talent. We all know that, loads of talent. But at the moment, he doesn't look like he's playing with any heart, and I don't know whether he's disengaged with the team in terms of the individuals, but I think he's disengaged with the team in terms of the team goals. He doesn't seem to be a team player, Macca. He seems to be quite an individual player.
It's a very fair comment, actually, because he was a star as a 16-year-old and doing his own thing on ball, and he was an on-baller at that stage. So he's certainly going to be no stranger to playing on ball if he's ever given that opportunity. But I think he's obviously in his younger days. I reckon he's probably got away with everything because he's been a junior star, and he's brought that sort of attitude into the AFL, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So before we go into the stats, a couple of other observations. Obviously, Rankin and I'm not sure about Geordie, but certainly Rankin had to deal with the tag for the second week in a row. And I noticed someone earlier in the chat mentioned that he didn't handle it very well. And that is true. He didn't have a massive influence on the game, although he did try to work himself into the game as the match wore on. Obviously he got rid of Starcevic early, and my initial thought was he'll get a fine, but as soon as Starcevic failed the HIA, that's pretty much an automatic week, I think.
Well, I don't know whether I saw all the vision or not, Payne. All I can remember seeing was Rankin stationary with the other guy running at him and Rankin raising his arm up, his shoulder up, and the bloke running into his shoulder. He wasn't
stationary.
So Rankin wasn't stationary?
No, he ran back into him. I don't think he intended to hit him in the head. It was actually a bit of a head clash, I think, because Ranks went off with blood. I think Ranks actually hit him shoulder to chest, but the whiplash effect made them clash heads, and that's, I think, what caused the concussion.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, he probably, well, look, he's a Crows player. It doesn't matter if he is or isn't guilty. He'll get two.
Oh, I think he'll just get. I think he'll get a week. I don't think he'll get two, because I think the head contact was incidental. It wasn't Rankin's shoulder making contact with the head. It was, as I said, it was the whiplash effect, because Starcevic wasn't braced at all. So as soon as he copped it in the chest, his head just snapped forward. I think had there not been the head clash, it would have been fine, because it obviously winded him. But he came back on. But given the HIA outcome, I think Rankin will get a week, which is going to be a real test, given that we're playing a St Kilda side that's had a good win this week.
Yeah, well, yeah, knocking off Sydney is a very, very good performance. And is that, I haven't looked at where it's being played, Fane.
Well, it's obviously home, because this week was away.
Right. So, yeah. Well, we certainly can't afford to lose a player of his ability, because he just, even today, even though he didn't do a lot, some of the stuff he did was quite magical, because he is just a magical type player. When you compare him to number 4 and number 33, well, you're talking certainly different types of footballers, and we can't afford to lose like Rankin.
Yeah. Look, the other one was Geordie Dawson. I didn't notice a hard tag on Jordan, but he didn't seem to be able to get into the game terribly much. There's talk about him carrying a foot injury. I don't know whether he's over that yet. He doesn't seem as dynamic through congestion as he has been in the past. But certainly the last few weeks he's struggled. Well,
yeah, somebody's got put in the chat he had a terrible game. Well, he did. He had a shocking game, and I think he's got to be playing injured, Fiend, because of the fact that I think if you go back several weeks, and I think you could have put a tag on Dawson, and I think he could have done anything. He was in marvellous form at that stage. But at no stage today did he look like he was ever going to get really going into the game. And I reckon he's definitely carrying injuries.
Well, he's carrying a foot injury. He's been carrying a foot injury.
Yeah.
So, and those list ranks can be bloody painful. Or turf toe it is. Yeah, you're right, Bane Hilda, turf toe. And if that's the case, then they need to just give him a rest.
Well, I agree with you. There is no point at this stage of playing Dawson. When he's firing, he's our best player, and at the moment, he's nowhere near it at the moment, because his last two have been nothing like a Dawson game, and I would much rather see him not play, and we probably going to lose most of those games coming up anyhow. So, what's the point?
Well, exactly right, Macca. What's the point? And you want to pick your side to win the game and all the rest of it. And I know that Darren Burgess has got a mantra of teaching players how to play through injury, and that's fine. But you want to balance that out with where we're sitting in terms of not only our season but our development. And winning games now is more or less pointless. And I'm not saying that the team shouldn't go out to try to win, but what I'm saying is that the coaching staff and list management staff need to be utilising the squad in a way that assists development just as much as trying to win a game. And, this is why I can't understand why the coach comes out and says Brodie Smith is part of our future. What future? Like, what exactly. Future is Brodie Smith a part of, apart from the fact that he shouldn't even be in the side now? What KPIs are being applied to Brodie Smith and Lockie Murphy that keep them in the side?
Well, they certainly shouldn't be in the side. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the other thing that I was very angry with that remark from Nix, that he is an important part of the future. He'll be bloody 34 next year. To say that a 34-year-old is going to be an important part of the future, I mean, I was actually starting to support Nix and thinking, yeah, maybe Nix will be all right. But when he comes out with comments like that, and I start to think, maybe you should be going.
Well, over the performance of Lockie Murphy is even more so damning on Nix. I don't understand why Lockie Murphy's in our leadership group, but I don't understand what Lockie Murphy is bringing to our side that demands selection. And, you know, we didn't have Will Hamill this week, which brought Brodie Smith back into the fray. But nevertheless, you or I would have been better on the bench or as a sub than Lockie Murphy this week, mate.
Well, we wouldn't have had to do very much to be better. He's very ordinary. And as I say, no, I better not use my old goat picture as a joke, but he's just, look, I don't understand why he's in the side. He is probably, if you went through all the AFL teams and had to rate him out of the, what do you got, 18 teams, or 24 players. You've got about 400 players playing every week. He's probably about 390-something player. He's no good.
And Bobby on the chat says that Nix reckons that Smith and Murphy do team things that the average punter can't see because apparently we're all dickheads. But even if that's the case, they do a lot of things that we can see that are bloody terrible. And at the end of the day, the game is about getting the ball and using it properly. And under those two metrics, Smith and Murphy fail dismally and have been failing all season.
Yep. And they're in the leadership group. That's the other thing. And they're in the bloody leadership group. So you've got your leader, two of your leadership group as possibly the two worst players in the side.
And I thought, again, once Zach Taylor came on, and he tried something at the end, it didn't come off, but the game was done anyway. But again, I thought he showed poise, he showed maturity, he used the ball pretty well. And, give the kid a run. Give the kid a run. Why wouldn't you start Lockie Murphy as sub if you want to keep him around the players for his non-statistical role and play Zach Taylor, for goodness sake?
100%, Shane. 100%. The kid's not been given a fair go. I mean, I heard one of the football chats during the week, and Lee Matthews was talking in particular. He said the one thing that really gets up his nose is a young player coming in for his first game and being made the sub. He said, if you think the player's good enough to be in the side, put him in the bloody side and give him a proper chance to have a go, rather than just sitting him on the bench. So when he's got to come in there it's not fair to the young lads. And I think he's had 2 quarters a quarter and a bit this time, but to me, he's shown that he's got ability. Give him. I mean, we've got nothing to lose by playing this lad a full game of footy and see what he can do in a full game.
And again, as someone pointed out in the chat, B Packer, had it not been for Chase Jones' injury, Zach wouldn't have even been getting a run right now. And you could say that about just about all the young kids in our side. That they're only in there due to injury, and they're not Nix's preferred 22.
Yeah. Look, somebody said in the chat, he chose his squad pre-season, he's not budging. You could be forgiven for thinking that. You really could be forgiven for thinking that. Just trotting out the same old players and rotating them when one's injured, just to put in another one. But it's... you look at some of the sides that experiment with young players. They find players by giving them 2 or 3 games on the trot. They find players. We're not going to find too many bloody players the way we play it.
Well, I mean, he gave himself away when he said at the beginning of the season, or after about half a dozen games during the season, that he wasn't considering Billy Dowling for a debut this season. He obviously had, as some, you could very easily surmise that he's picked his best 25 or so at the beginning of the season, and that's it. You know, Billy didn't have a great game today, but he's learning, and they're the sorts of games that these kids need to be involved in. High-pressure games against good opposition, and you learn stuff. Billy would have learnt more today than in 20 games in the SANFL.
Well, no, well said, Payne. I thought Billy Dowling was, as I said, he had 5 frees given against him. I reckon 3 of them shouldn't have been given against him. But what it means is the lad was at the ball and contesting for the ball. 19 touches. I thought his game was okay. As I said,
I didn't say it was terrible, but he found himself in some situations that he'll learn from. You know.
Yeah, and a lot of those he put himself in there because he's not scared to go in there, and other ones, poor disposal put him into that situation. So, but I think the kid's got talent, and I think he's shown he's got talent.
100%.
And you know, to me, he's just to lay down his there, just play him every game this year, no matter how he goes, and because he'll develop into a good player for next year.
Yep, 100%. 100%. All right, let's look at some stats real quick. Disposals 347 to 344, pretty even. Brisbane kicked the ball a bit more, 233 to 205, although we certainly changed it up in part after half time, although we didn't stick with that for too long, but we were certainly trying to play a bit more of a possession chip style game to slow the game down after half time. 55 inside 50s to 48 probably tells the story more than anything else, Macca. Disposal efficiency was fairly similar. We weren't as efficient inside 50. We improved, I feel, later in the game. Fogarty and Himmelberg started to step up, and Tex had a bit of a purple patch as well. Free kicks, as you mentioned, 26 to 15. It wasn't the best umpiring display you've ever seen. Stoppages. So your man, Big O, did exactly what you predicted and took Riley to the cleaners again, Macca, despite the stats showing that we had more hit-outs.
Yeah, McInerney always does it to O'Brien. He's got those great big long arms. He's a good player, McInerney. And he's a very, very underrated ruckman. And, too good for Rob.
Yeah, absolutely too good. Some of the tap work to Neil was sublime. They've obviously got a very, very good understanding. I thought, as B Packer said in the chat, I thought Himmelberg wasn't bad. I wouldn't say necessarily good, but I think he fulfilled his role in the side, took a couple of nice marks, kicked a couple of nice goals, missed one that he probably should have kicked. Wasn't disgraced in the ruck when usually he was up against Danaher, who isn't a ruckman, but wasn't disgraced. Just a couple of times I noticed with Himmelberg, one in particular where the ball was coming down the near side and he was leading up to the ball, and I think it was Harris Andrews that spoiled it. He doesn't, as much as I think he's got some footy IQ, when it comes to marking, I don't know whether he has good awareness. He needed to, in that circumstance, just hold back and protect the drop zone so that the only person who could reach the ball when it arrived was himself. But he just allowed the defender to collapse onto him, and they're basic skills that you think an AFL player would have.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought he's taking his ruck work out of it, which he's not really a ruckman. Overall, I thought his game was at least acceptable in the sense that he did compete for marks. He did. He took 2 or 3 very, very good marks up forward. I've always sort of rated him as a player that's not really good enough for AFL, but today, at least I thought he got a pass at least for him.
Oh, he got a pass. He hasn't developed as much as I hoped that he would. I think he's a good backup tool. I think though that he will be best served with us in a trade situation. I don't think, it kind of depends, because it depends what we do with O'Brien, because to me the jury's in on Riley O'Brien. We will not contend with Riley as ruckman. I think I'd really like to see us go hard at Tim English. I know that there's a lot of noise about him going back west, but that's not a lay down situation. And I know that English hasn't been in great form this year, but I don't think anyone at the Bulldogs is terribly engaged at the moment. So I reckon he's gettable with the right amount of money, and I'd be spending money on him, I think.
Well, I'm in the same boat as you. He's average performances are better than Rob's best performances. So he's got a much higher ceiling than Rob. So I'm in the same camp as you. I'd be happy to get hold of him and to pay overs to get him, because he some of his taps on in his game, but I watched that, and some of his taps were very neat, where he, flick over the shoulder to the midfield and all that sort of stuff. Rob just can't do that, and and he can also take marks, and he can also put him up forward, and he'll take marks and kick goals, a couple of goals a game if you leave him there. So for me, he would be the answer, and therefore, if you have somebody that would be the answer, pay the money and get him.
Pay the money. The money.
Yeah, and we'd get something for Rob. I mean, clubs are always looking for a ruckman, always. So even if we got a second for Rob, I'd be bloody delighted.
Oh, I think there's no doubt that there's clubs around that would happily take Rob. But I just think in terms of where we're at, he's shown that he's only good in certain circumstances. He's also only good after getting a rocket and getting dropped for a couple of weeks and getting 900 touches in the twos. He's just not a good ruckman, and he doesn't do enough around the ground under good opposition.
Look, in fairness to Rob, I'll say this. I think he tries to the best of his ability, but his ability is limited.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Clearances 42 to 37. We broke even at centre clearance, although I think their centre clearances were more damaging. But it was really around stoppage. We kind of evened that up late, but for a while there they were destroying us around stoppage. Ended up being 28-24, and I just felt like what we were doing was just trying to contain, whereas Brisbane were more creative out of stoppage. And the other thing, speaking about Riley O'Brien, Macca, is the amount of times in the third quarter when it was obvious that we were trying to close up the game, he was trying to hit the ball to the outside. It's like, what are you trying to do? Why are you hitting the ball to the outside? We don't, and not only to the outside, but into the bloody lane. It's like, Jesus, if you're going to do that, do it boundary side. Don't do it goal side. It seemed like he didn't read the halftime memo.
Yeah, well, all I can say, he's not bright. I mean, he's actually a very clever man intellectually, but not at football.
Yeah. As usual, contested possessions was good from us, 130 to 124. Uncontested, negligible difference there, 12. The turnover's fairly even, but Brisbane had a bit more of the ball during the course of the match. So, look, not a lot to separate the sides statistically, but I think their stoppage work and their ability to hurt us on turnover was probably the two big factors. And when we tried to move the ball, we just weren't as clean as they were, and at times, particularly in the first half, our delivery into the forward 50 was horrific.
I think one of the major differences between the two sides at the centres, centre clearances, their centre clearances were very definitive. They were straight down the centre, right, straight down the guts every time, and therefore it put it into a dangerous scoring position. And whereas sometimes we went out to the flanks, but occasionally we went forward straight down, but most of the time we'd run out to the flanks or something like that. And the best way to put a side under pressure, particularly if you've got two tools like they have, is to go straight down the guts. Yeah.
But again, and this is to me a product of Nathan Van Berlo's coaching, we so often try to initiate body contact at centre work Macca, and the only bloke that I see really trying to get some separation is Jake Saligo.
Yes.
But our other midfielders they seem to almost at times turn their back on the bloody contest and just engage physically, and it really frustrates me because you immediately you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Well, one thing Saligo does, which the others don't do, is Saligo actually he sits in stands in a position where he can actually attack the ball with momentum, and he's prepared to take hits and knocks to get his way through. Whereas the others are standing basically flat-footed, and so therefore any kicks they get, they kick under pressure. So Saligo's got the right idea. He's a good midfielder. He actually does it the way you should be doing it, but he hasn't got much help there.
Well, that's right, Macca, and I was always taught as a midfielder that the only time you need to be in the right position is when the ball's there, right? So you don't want to be standing where you think the ball is going to be tapped to. You don't want to be there. You want to be anywhere else but there. You want to be on the move when the ball gets there, so that you can do what Jakey does so well, and that's hit the ball with pace and momentum. And actually be able to drive through. And we just Laird in particular, he just stands there. He just stands there. And I noticed Laird a lot too. Wasn't even getting his hands dirty often. He was sitting out on the outside, and I don't know whether that was because we designated Sam to get a lot of the contested work, but Laird I thought played a really lazy game.
I think Berry was the nominated man to try and charge through, because Berry has got the courage to do it. And he's also got a bit of speed as well, which Laird hasn't got. So I think the way that Berry would attack the ball when he came through, he was trying to do it at speed, and he was prepared to take the knocks to do it. Whereas Laird, as you quite correctly said, is very stationary, which is why when he takes the ball, then he does these dump kicks around his body.
Yeah, or looks backward for the outlet.
Yeah,
he's never going. He will never go through congestion. He'll always run around it or kick around it.
Yeah. So I said Saligo's our only one. Berry, I'll have to give a bit of credit to, that he has tried to do it as well.
Yeah, well, you know how I feel about Sam. I think he's certainly worth persevering with. I feel like every club needs a workhorse, and yes, Sam lacks a little bit of class at times, but at least for a cold-faced midfielder, at least he stands up in tackles, at least he moves the ball forward, and he's not looking for cheapies. He earns every possession, and at least his possessions generally are trying to be creative and constructive and move the ball forward.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. Just to finish off stats, marks 105 to 86, which is quite interesting, considering the kicks weren't that much different. It shows me that Brisbane used the ball a little bit better, or effectively. Marks inside 50 was pretty much the same. Contested marks, surprisingly, our way. Although, again, I think our tall lads did well on Danaher and Hitwood by and large. I don't think they got off the chain terribly much. It was at the deck that we got done.
I thought the big guys were outstanding, actually, because there was a lot of pressure coming down there. It came down a lot of times, and I think they both all of them did very, very well. Yeah,
defensively, I thought actually we did quite all right, considering that the ball was coming in a little bit more often. So, again, I don't think defence is our problem at all, Mac. I think, as we keep going on about, midfield is the key, and we, suffered this week from Rankin being held, Dawson being down, and Laird being there.
Yes, and yes.
All right, let's have a look at some of the individual stats. And, here we are. Rory Laird, 27 touches, 11 kicks, 16 handballs. You look at the stat line and you think, geez, that's not a bad game. But 146 metres gained for someone who didn't play a lot in the inside, 10 contested possessions, 9 ground ball gets, which was almost a team high, 77% time on ground. But when you look at score involvements, let's have a look, 6 score involvements, which wasn't too bad. So, statistically, it looks like a decent game, Macca, but to me, it just doesn't pass the eye test, does it?
It's the usage of that ball. I think he's done very well in terms of numbers, but he hasn't done very well in terms of usage.
Yeah, well, he always does well in terms of numbers. It's the usage that becomes a problem, isn't it?
Mm.
And then you see the next bloke talking about usage, 22 touches for Brodie Smith, 11-11, 348 metres gained, 63.6 kicking efficiency. Again, 14 uncontested possessions. It doesn't look like a bad game, but it just, to me, just didn't have any influence.
Yeah, but he nearly broke his neck running down to get the kickoffs from the points to pad up his stats. He actually did one good one. He actually took me by surprise. He did one kick to the left-hand side, which hit a man on the chest. I nearly fell over.
I actually nearly wrote on the game day chat that Brodie must have been confused because he kicked out to the left.
Yep. Yeah.
Lockie Scholl, also 22 touches, 16-6. Look, he played all right, Lockie, but geez, he gets ragdolled sometimes, doesn't he? The one that Link McCarthy just basically brushed him off in the forward line. It was, geez, Lockie, put some muscle on, would you?
He needs to, but I will say this. He used to be a giant squib, and I can't remember seeing one incident where he piked it. I think he's been told, he's obviously been spoken to about at times his lack of courage, but to his credit, I think he's done well. He's gone into places where he wouldn't have gone before.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's a fair call, Mac. I think that's a fair call. The damning stat here is that so far of the top three, we've had one midfielder who we've decided wasn't that effective anyway, Rory Laird. Then we've got Smith, Scholl, Keane, Nankervis, Nick Murray, before we get down to Billy Dowling with 19 touches, Sam Berry with 19 touches, Jake Saligo with 16 touches, along with Isaac Rankin, and then also Geordie Dawson. So we got absolutely flogged in the midfield, and the stats back that up. The individual stats back that up.
Yeah, they certainly do.
So thanks for that insightful comment, Mac.
No.
Look, I thought Keane played well.
Yeah, I was going to say, those stats actually tell the story, Fiend. They do. You had to go through all those other players before you got to the players you'd really want to be getting the high numbers, and that's the midfielders. Not just Laird with who doesn't use it that well, but the other midfielders, even Saligo, and 16 is not a great effort, but certainly when you it is hard when you're rowing to a losing ruck, when you've got the McInerney putting it right down the other opposition throat. It does make it very hard.
Well, and I can pick bits and pieces of stats out. One stat that jumps out at me is Geordie Dawson spending 91% time on ground. Now, if he's carrying a foot injury, why are you overloading him like that?
That's an interesting stat, Bean, because I said to Mrs. Mack on about 3 or 4 occasions, where the hell's Dawson? So he wasn't getting the ball, so it was a waste of time but bloody being out there. Yeah.
And look, I think it was the right thing to do to send him behind the ball after half time or after three-quarter time when Hinge obviously got injured.
Yes.
But I probably would have made that move a little bit earlier,
Well, I definitely would have made it earlier. He wasn't firing anywhere up forward or on the ball. So, I would have definitely put him back.
Yeah. And when you've got a player like Ben Keys, who's in a bit of a hot streak, I'm a big believer that if a player's hot, you use him, right? The players go through times during games or they have a bit of a form streak where they're just really on, and I think Ben was really on today, and I would have got Ben in and around the contest a bit more. That, you know, every time it went forward, he looked dangerous. He obviously was up for it, and he obviously was in good nick. And I would have had him around the ball. I would have had him shaking things up with Lockie Neal and McCluggage.
Yeah, he really was flying today. So it was, if you're ever going to do that, today would be the time to do it as well.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, you've got to be flexible like this. You've got to be able to read the tea leaves. And I think, you know, when you've got a situation where Geordie, for whatever reason, was obviously getting held, why is he flogging a dead horse? You know, make it difficult for them. Make it hard for them. Put the player in a position where potentially he can use some other skills. We know Jordan Dawson can take a mark. You know, play him behind the ball or even move him up forward for a little while. Do something. But when you've got a player like Keys, I noticed after Keys kicked those 2 goals, they brought him off. Why do you have to bring Ben Keys off? He's playing fucking forward pocket. He doesn't need a rest.
He shouldn't come off at all.
In basketball, when someone's hot from outside the 3-point line, you keep giving it to him, right? You don't take him off. You keep giving it to him, and that's, I think, something that goes missing a little bit in Aussie rules, and certainly it did today for us. This scheduled rotation for a player that's playing up forward and, you know, not near the ball for a long period of time, why does he need to come off?
Well, in my opinion, you know, somebody like Keys, who the role that he plays, he could stay on the ground 100% of the time, and you could work your rotations around other players that probably need to have a shorter burst.
Yeah, it's about making the team difficult to play against, and when you got a guy who's obviously on it, you take advantage of it, even if it's only for a 10 or 15 minute burst. You give Keezy a run after he's just kicked 2 goals. We know what Ben Keys is like. He's like white line fever kind of guy, and you want him to get the next centre clearance, you know?
Absolutely. And the other thing too, which I do not understand, is that coaches don't take a more positive attitude when one of their star players is being tagged. Like, instead of allowing them to play their normal position and just be tagged and being held down to a very moderate game. I mean, we're talking about players with ability. You don't tag the players that are no good. So the player that's being tagged is obviously a quality player. Let that player go out on a wing or a halfback flank or a half forward flank, which would isolate his opponent. And, you know, so I don't know why they don't do it.
Well, I agree with that, Macca. And, you know, someone like Isaac, who, he kicks goals, he gets clearances, his workaround stoppage is fantastic. But he's getting held like that, all right? Let's chuck him at half-back for 10 minutes. Let's let him just run out the ball and use it and get him into the game. There is so much lack of flexibility in the thinking that they just continue to flog a dead horse, and I would love to see Rankin like just burst off half-back for half a quarter or something like that. Just get him 4 or 5 kicks, get him involved. Again, then Brisbane have got to react. You know, what are we going to do about this? But we don't. We just flog a dead horse. And we're not alone. Yeah. I think that's actually endemic of the AFL system these days. That, you know, the coaches are so entrenched in their bloody shapes and models and all that sort of crap. They've actually lost the feel for the game. They've actually lost the ability to impact the game. Coaches used to be able to impact the game with changes, and there are very few coaches, in my opinion, at the moment, Macca, that have the ability to do that. Don't you think?
Yeah, this shape of the game thing really shits me off, because I've heard coaches being asked, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Well, because we had to hold our shape. Now, you're getting done. So you do something different, you bloody idiot. And that's what the suggestion is. And as I said, you know, the player that gets tagged is a star. That's why he would be tagged otherwise. put them out in the open where it's one-on-one, and you'll get your benefit out of that player. And then the coach has to be flexible and allow for that, plan for that eventuality. But they don't seem to.
I think one of the actual problems, and Bonehilda, yes, Nix isn't the only one that talks about shape and all that sort of crap. And look, there's a place for it. We definitely changed our quote-unquote shape after half-time to lock down the game. There's no doubt about that. So there's a place for that sort of defensive structure. You know, West Coast and Hawthorn won flags using a certain structure, a certain defensive structure and all the rest of it. I get it, understand it. But I think half the problem is that the way they train these days is very much in their groups. So Isaac would have never, ever, ever trained with a defensive group. And I think as a consequence of that, the coaches are not inclined to place them in those positions because, we've never trained for it. You know, so I think there's a bit of a combination of the way that they train these days and the amount of time they spend on structures. I even saw it when my lad was playing 18s, Mac, for West, and it wasn't just Westies, it was all of them. Like, they were all about structure. And, you know, the individual talent development was played second fiddle to learning the game style that the team wanted to play or the coach wanted them to play. And, you know, I think when you get down to the pointy end of a season and you get to the preliminary finals and the grand finals, do you ever see a game of football won because a team held their shape?
No. You just somebody played bloody better than somebody else.
Well, it's someone better or an individual effort or just like more desire or a show of courage or like, yes, obviously they have to play within a team structure, but it's not the team structure that gets them over the line. It's the mentality of the players and the talent of the players and you know, often moments of individual brilliance. So, you know, I don't know.
It's always individual efforts. It has to be the amalgamation or culmination of all the individual efforts put together and done in a manner that's been successful. And, you know, somebody quoted out there when they're talking about that, they quoted Darren Jarman. If you go back to that final that he won for us, that had nothing to do with shape. That just had to do, every time he got down, he was too bloody good for his opponent.
But it was also a creative mood. And yes, the game's moved on from the mid-90s. You know, obviously the game's moved on from that. But, you know, Malcolm it was gut feel, it was instinct, it was strategy. It was nothing more than that. You know, the Shane Allen move was born out of a game that he went and watched like at the beginning of the season. That Shane Allen went up forward and he just kept it in his mind and said, I'll keep that one up my sleeve. You know, it's about having a feel for the game and sometimes I just feel, and, you know, I think this is probably old man yelling at the sky a bit because, you know, the modern game is a little bit about structure and all that sort of stuff. But I think at times a coach has got to look at an individual. You've got 23 blokes. How best can I use them? And if one of my blokes who's a gun is getting held because of the position that he's playing or whatever, then let's shake it up. Let's make ourselves difficult to play against.
Absolutely.
So anyway, look, you know, so really the stats bear out that our running players and our midfield players did not get enough of it at all. You know, ranks with 8 kicks. Geordie Dawson with 8 kicks. Braden Cook with 8 kicks. Josh Rochelle with 6 kicks. You know, it's just Lockie Murphy with 5 kicks. It just not enough from those players, and we held up quite well across half-back. I thought Mitch Hinge, again, was playing an excellent game until he got injured, which was a shame. It looked like a calf to me. Hopefully it was a knock rather than a muscle tear, but I haven't heard any more about that. But we just got outgunned by a good midfield.
Yeah, the midfield was far too good. When you've got the quality players, Neil and Dunkley in particular, class.
So not much else to say, Macca. I don't know whether I haven't been watching the chat to see if anyone wants to have a say. No, there's no hands up, but if there is anyone that wants to come on and have a say, then feel free to do so. I have to again say thank you to everyone who's joined us on Spreaker and YouTube and not Spreaker, Discord, YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. There's about 80 on YouTube, which is fantastic as usual. So thanks to everyone who continues to get around us, Macca. We've got St Kilda next week. It looks like perhaps 2 changes, with Rankin probably not available and Hinge maybe not available. What's the feel? What do you think is going to be the likely changes there?
Well, I don't know how severe Hamill's injury is. Is Hamill, would he be available next?
No. He's got a hand injury. I think he had to have surgery.
Oh, okay. Well, that ruins that possibility. I don't really know, because we certainly can't replace quality with the same quality. With Rankin, they should. Well, there's no reason at all why they shouldn't give young Taylor a full game then. I mean, it's a downgrade. I agree with that, because Rankin is a star, but we're at the stage of the season where we're not going anywhere anyhow. And it's an opportunity to give the lad a full game, and for him to learn, and for us to see how much he can give us. That's one possibility.
Well, I think there's a real opportunity to play Curtin. I think Curtin has to come in. We've lost our halfback flanker, Mac, and Brodie Smith. Despite the coach's loving words, was less than serviceable. So I think there's a strong opportunity for Dan to come in and play in a role similar to Luke Nankervis. I think that I'd like to see him sort of move between halfback and wing. I think there's definitely an opportunity to give Zach a full game. I'd be dropping Lockie Murphy, but that's not going to happen. But the other one I think needs to come in is Oscar Ryan.
Well, Oscar Ryan apparently has been playing really good footy, and he probably should have come in before Smith did. He's one that definitely deserves a run just on form. Apparently Edwards didn't go too bad either, the tall lad who plays as a midfielder. But Oscar Ryan probably is the number one player on form in the twos to come in. And I wouldn't be against Curtin coming in. Look, if we don't treat Curtin as a potential AFL player, he'll piss off on us. The way he got treated, like in the first game, was, and I've been through that a couple of times, express how I was disgusted how where the coach placed him and what he did with him, etc. He just needs to be given a chance to play in a position where he's more comfortable, where he can actually make his own game as well. So, I wouldn't be against bringing him in, but I'm pretty sure they won't.
Mac, I'm willing to bet your superannuation that Dan Curtin asked for a trade.
Oh, I wouldn't take the bet, because there's every chance he will.
And to be perfectly honest with you, the way our coaching staff and our development staff work at the moment, it would be best for Dan, and it would probably be the best way for us to use him at the moment, because we'd probably still get a top 10 pick for him. I just don't think that he's ever going to be put in a situation where we're going to get the best out of him. And I think Dan probably would know that, considering he's still being played freaking fullback half the time. I reckon he'll ask for a trade.
Yeah, look, that would not surprise me. I mean, he was crucified in the first game that he played, then he was made a sub and got a few minutes, and then kicked back to the twos. Look, I don't know how happy he is, or how happy he's not with us, but certainly if I was him, I'd be pissed off. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, look, Brodie Smith apparently is our future, and that's our halfback flank gone. So where are they planning on playing Dan Curtin, Mako?
Well, that probably been one of the most disgusting comments that he's ever made. Next, that comment about Smith. That is just so ridiculously. That is the comment of a fool, actually.
Yeah. So if they played Guy Man saying they played Curtin in the mids all day against Centrals, so that's a good sign at least. But we all know that our midfield's stacked, so I just I don't know. I don't know. I just don't think that he's going to stick around.
Look, I have that same horrible feeling, Pam, and if we'd handled his debut better and all that sort of stuff, and given him an opportunity, given him a run of games to try and show what he's got and to get confidence and all the rest of it. But no, we'll probably bring in something like McHenry.
Well, McHenry 22 touches and a goal or two yesterday. So yeah. I'd like to see Ryan in. I'd like to see Curtin in. I'd like to see Taylor elevated, and I'd like to see Lockie Murphy dropped or at least made the sub. I don't know how how realistic that's going to be, though.
Well, I'd second all that, but I don't think it'll happen. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Everything you said, they all make sense. They make sense what you said, but Nix is desperate. He is desperate. I still think he's either too close to the old boys or he's too worried about himself. One of the two, because he doesn't do the right thing by the young lads.
The thing is, Mako, like, I get that Nix wants to keep his job. That's human nature. But if I was him and I knew football and I knew I was close to the players and saw how they trained and I understood their injuries and all the rest of it, I wouldn't be putting my faith in blokes like Brodie Smith. If I wanted to keep my job, Brodie Smith is the last player. Lockie Murphy's the last player that I'd be putting my faith in, because they're not producing. They don't produce, and this is the thing that makes me confused. People say, "Oh, Nix is coaching for his job." Well, if he was, then he wouldn't be playing bloody Lockie Murphy.
But for some reason he does, and he will.
But if that's the case, then he's a poor judge. He's a poor judge, because I don't care what Lockie Murphy's doing to non-statistical rubbish. The simple fact is that he cost us goals this week. Brodie Smith cost us goals this week. Neither of them are playing like long-term experienced players in a leadership group. What value are they actually providing? There is none.
No, I mean, it's a disgrace actually, because they should never be in the leadership group for a start, because they're not good enough to be in the leadership group, but they are. And so if you're in the leadership group, at least play like you are a leader, not like they do.
Yeah, so I mean that's where I find it confusing, and that's where it starts to make me think, well, maybe Nix isn't a very good judge, because if I was banking my coaching career on certain individuals, I'll tell you what, it wouldn't be bloody those two. So the fact that he is makes me think, well, shit, maybe he's just not a very good judge.
Well, if I'm right, there's only 7 matches to go for the season. Is that right?
Yep.
If I was Nix, I'd use my smarts, and I'd go to the committee and I'd say, look, we're not going to make the 8. So we've got 7 weeks. Why don't we use these 7 weeks? At the end of the year, we've got to make decisions on players, whether we keep them or whether we delist them, whether we try to trade them. So why don't we go through all the players that are in doubt and give them a game? And let's just see how it goes. Don't worry about the results of the game. And we'll try and do our best. We're not saying that we won't try to win. We will try to win, but we will, over those 7 weeks, we'll feed in 1 or 2 lads each game and just see how they go. Because
look,
at the moment,
I agree.
If you announce it that way, that's what you're going to do.
I agree with you, Mako.
Well, people will accept that. And you will accept
I agree with you, but But he should have been doing that for the last 2 seasons. I mean, I'm not going to go through it again, but, you know, we saw the change. We saw the shift after round 7 or 8 last season. And ever since, he's backed these blokes in, Matt Crouch, Brodie Smith, Lockie Murphy, you know, and they've all had good games at times or whatever. But how he can turn around and say that Brodie Smith is the future, a 34-year-old half-back flanker with a crook back and a loose radar with his kicks. Like, I just don't understand how he can make that judgment. And the fact that he has made that judgment just makes me think, well, shit.
No, he lost me with that.
It's not working.
He totally lost it. Well, no, when he made that comment, I didn't really want him as my coach. Once he said that, that was enough for me, because we've put up with a lot.
Go on.
And we've had to put up with a lot from him. Things that we think are illogical, and players not given a chance, players played when they shouldn't be played. But to come out with that comment, I think that tops everything he's ever said or done. To that, a 30-foot, which he will be next year, a 34-year-old as an important part of our future. Well, I'll be buggered. Yeah, he lost me on that.
100%, Mac. 100%. So anyway, you know, next week's selection is going to be quite interesting, because there's the opportunity to bring a couple of new faces in, but there's also the opportunity to stink it up and go back to the well with blokes that we know what their ceiling is, and their ceiling is very high. So we'll wait and see. It will probably cement our spot one way or the other in terms of our finish. And look, you know, North keep winning. It's not out of the question that we might actually get passed over by them, which would be an absolute shocker. The fact that we've only got 2 more wins than West Coast is an absolute shocker, like, when you think about it.
Yeah, look, I don't care how many wins we get in the remaining 7 games. We're not going to play final. So that's a given. So, you know, I'm not saying play for draft pick, but a good draft pick is a good draft pick. And at the same time, we've got with is that you've got a list that you don't know anything and everything about them, because you haven't given them the opportunity. So at least try them a couple of weeks. You've got nothing to lose.
I'm glad, Macca, that you've finally come around to my way of thinking. It's taken you all season, but I'm glad we finally got there.
That's some slow learning, you think?
No, just no. You're a very learned gentleman.
No, I just know when it's time to say that you can't win. You know, it's pointless winning. And I know that supporters want their team to win, but you've got to think about the future of the club. You've got to think about we don't want to go through this again next year. We want to make sure that we do the things that we do now, get us ready for next year. Because this year is gone. It's lost. There's nothing to be gained. So therefore, use the rest of the year to get ready for next year, so that we have some advantage over what we would have had if we don't do it. And I'm afraid that Nick's is still worried about his own skin, but if he came to that agreement with the committee that that's what he's going to do, I'm sure then they'd back him.
Agreed. But it would be a very un-Adelaide thing to do, Macca, so let's not hold our breath, right?
Well, that's all, you know. What's the other alternative? Just keep playing the same team and losing. What's the point?
Mate, the 8 and anything can happen.
No, it won't happen.
Mate, that's been the Crows' philosophy for 20 years, unfortunately.
And and they've been wrong every time, every year.
Correct. Never mind. All right, well, look, we could crap on about that for another 20 minutes, but we're pretty much going around in circles now, because I think everyone here and most people that are listening to us agree, Mac, and we'll just have to wait and see what the club does. But it's a big game either way next week against St Kilda. And Macca, one thing is for certain. We will be back next Sunday night to talk about it.
Well, that's for sure, we will.
Do you reckon we're getting over the line against the Saints?
I think not, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I don't rate the Saints that high. I just don't. But having said that, I've knocked off Sydney, and so their form must be reasonably good. So normally I would say, yeah, I think we're a genuine chance. If they maintain the form that beats Sydney, well, then we don't have a chance. Um, but no, it's at home, and yeah, oh, no, we'll lose. That's my tip.
I think if we come out and play an attacking, aggressive style of football, we'll win by 10 goals. If he tries to make it a 0-0 draw, then Ross is far too smart for him, and we'll get done by a couple.
Oh, that's how Ross likes to have it normally.
That's exactly right. So if Nixie plays into his hands and tries to shut it down and make it a bog, then we will lose. But if we play aggressive football, Saints can't go with that, and we'll win comfortably. That's my view.
Yeah, well, as I said, I've never rated the Saints that high, but they obviously played very, very well today against Sydney to beat them. So they're obviously
they only scored 13 goals. They only scored 13 goals, Mac.
Yes, it's their restriction on the opposition. I understand that.
Yeah.
But it'll be a shocking game to watch.
Well, we'll see. If we come out and play fast football, then it won't be, because we are good to watch when we play fast, aggressive football. As I said, it will depend on the game style. And my thoughts are, considering the relative success we had in shutting Brisbane down, in part during the second half, I think he might try and refine that a bit and play possession footy. And if we do that, we'll lose.
Well, yeah, I don't have the faith in him. I really don't have the faith in him to learn anything. He doesn't seem to learn anything week after week. We just hear the same messages trotted out week after week playing.
Well, let's not lament it any longer. Let's wait and see what happens. In the meantime, thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight on all our platforms and those on the Discord Stadium chat. As usual, it's been a good night, good discussion, Macca. And I hope that it's lifted you a little bit, mate, because you're pretty flat when you came on.
Oh, very flat. I came on. I'm really flat. Flat in the pancake, mate. Really flat. I just couldn't believe what I've been watching.
All right.
Anyhow.
All right. Well, look, thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. Good night, Legend.